Very good morning and welcome to Nigeria Decides 2023 studios from Spectrum Television. We're broadcasting live from Uyo, the Akwa state capital. A very big hello from me. I am Raymond Ita. It's the day after the elections, the second of the two major elections we were expecting in the year 2023 as Nigerians headed out to the polls to cast their votes for governors of their choice as well as representatives of their various constituencies in the State House of Assemblies across the country. Well, if you joined us yesterday, we did our bit to keep you updated with events surrounding the elections, primarily in the Akwa state, while we had our focus also extending to other parts of the country. We follow up on that today as the respective collation centers across the 28 states where governorship elections were experienced are ongoing right now. We'll head over to INEC's collation center in Akwa state in a short while, but just before that, I'm not here alone in our studios. Suyaya Nekan joins me as well. Good morning to you, and happy Sunday.
Yeah, good morning, Raymond. It's a good day to be here today. And of course, elections have happened, collations have begun, and we need to do a quick run by the Akwa Ibom State Collation Center where we have Esther Otoyo on standby. Just after that, we'll break down into the conversation.
At Udodoma here in Uyo, the Akwa state capital, where the resident electoral commissioner Sil Oromogbe would be expected to commence a formal announcement of the gubernatorial elections and state assembly elections as we saw in Akwa state yesterday. So it's open in a matter of time. We'll be getting to hear from the rec himself, while our correspondents Francis Edit and Esther Otoyo are on standby to give us feelers intermittently as we progress. Well, yesterday was a very busy day of elections in Nigeria. But one big question on the lips of many was why there was an apparent low turnout of voters compared to what we had on February 25. Perhaps people still had misgivings about INEC giving us the free, fair and credible polls they had promised us before the elections, but it appears the hopes of most Nigerians were dashed after what they saw on February 25, and that must have necessitated a poor turnout yesterday.
A lot of questions surrounding the low turnout of voters yesterday because for the first time also in the history of Nigeria's election, we experienced a hike, in terms of voter turnout during the presidential election that was organized on the 25th of February. But then the turnout of the elections, as it were, the irregularities, to a very large extent, who was announced as president-elect, the process actually affected the interest of the electorate in going back to the polls for the gubernatorial elections. I mean, there was a particular feed I was watching, and we heard young Nigerians say that they'd rather spend their time, playing football and, other street activities on election day instead of going to, quote unquote, waste their time at the polling units, because the last time everybody went out en masse to vote, we cannot say that our votes were counted. It's more like there is a system where elections are done before D-Day. Several clips making it the rounds even on the internet at this time. You're hearing people say, okay, let them just go ahead and put whoever they want to put on the seat. So it's more like the electorate have lost absolute faith in the system, called INEC, which is the electoral empire in Nigeria. They have lost faith also to a very large extent to our politicians, because I think part of the reasons why we are experiencing this is that there is a desperation that is clouding the politicians vying for different, positions. It's not just that, okay, we can go to the polls, whoever wins is the best man for the job because that's what the people say. We see, engineerings of different kinds of factors, rigging, voter suppression, and every kind of tool used just for a particular person to emerge as the winner, even as opposed to the will of the people. Because it's surprising that you see when we head to the polls, we have a person that has we have someone that has won, but yet that's not the energy on the street. But we do hear now that Esther Otoyo is ready for us, so let's head quickly to the Akwa State Collation Center. Hello, Esther, good morning.
Esther, relax.
I'm sure they're still getting set there for us. But as we can see, with regards to the Collation Center, they're just people gathered all together, and the process is soon to begin. We see that most of the personnel that will be, handling the issue are actually sitting.
That's right. That includes the party agents of the respective political parties,
of course,
as well as officials of INEC, all seated alongside the resident election commissioner, Mr. Orumogbe. And that leads us to perhaps touching quickly on the role INEC has played so far.
I think Esther is now ready for us. So let's just take Esther.
University.
Trying to establish contact with Esther Otoyo from the Collation Center. As soon as we can get clarity on pictures, we'll immediately defer back to the Collation Center just so we could get the figures from INEC as they trickle in. We already have it on good authority that some results have already, been collated from different polling units across the state. And as we promised, we'll also look at other states as well, where elections did take place yesterday, and disappointingly a lot of them were not so good news. Lagos, Rivers recorded a series of irregularities across some polling units. We'll touch on that all of later. We're just talking about the role INEC has played with this election. The expectation for many was that INEC would do better than February 25. As we all know, February 25 polls was disappointing, to say the least. But we thought there would be an improvement yesterday, but it looks like yesterday's polls was even worse, than what we saw on February 25, because it showed that in some states there was apparent connivance between the ruling parties and INEC officials in that state, so only contributing to the level of voter apathy that we saw in display yesterday.
There'll be a lot of connivance, because we also saw the fact that, as opposed to the February 25th polls, we saw voter intimidation rise way higher than it was on the 25th of February. For instance, Lagos was more like a no-go area. There were people who didn't even step out of their houses because they didn't want to get involved in the hassle. And then there were those who stepped out, and it was from one race to the other. Voter intimidation was very, very high. If we backtrack to the threat that was given by Ms. Liu Akinsanya, who, aka MC Oluoma of Road Parks and Transport in Lagos State, it was more like eventually we heard, oh, it was a joke that he made.
Isn't it funny that the Nigerian police is holding forth for I mean,
you can imagine the kind of coverage that some people have in this state, in this country, that even if it were to be a joke, you won't go far with that kind of joke in saner climes, because in a time like this where the tension is already up, the politics is already heated up, you can't come and make that kind of joke. But then, as opposed to saying that it was a joke, we saw in real time that was the situation of things in Lagos State. We have videos everywhere where people were told, if you are not voting for a certain party, you cannot come to this place. Now, like we conversed about it, it went beyond, a particular ethnic group. It was now just that if you're not voting for this particular, political party, then you cannot come into this place and vote. And we must say the truth. Some of these kinds of activities cannot go on if there is no collaboration between the electoral empire, INEC, and the security forces in the country. And one would say that this is a massive failure with regards to that. We saw Rotimi Amechi, former Minister of Transport, yesterday after voting in Rivers State. He said that this is the height of failure of governance in the country, especially, I'm telling you.
A government he is apparently a part of.
Yes, well, a government that he's apparently a part of course, he's of the APC. Now, he said, we saw that the police was collaborating with INEC to work against the people of Nigeria and the democratic free will. And he also went ahead to point out the fact that a section of the APC that is masterminded by the president-elect were the ones who chose Mahmood Yakubu as the chairman of INEC, therefore having, a lot of hold on what the process looks like as we are seeing.
Just factoring this in quickly, and why I think Rivers State would make for an interesting conversation here is that we know the role Governor Nyesom Wike played in ensuring Bola Tinubu of the APC won in Rivers State in the February 25 polls. And here is him now reverting to type by trying to stick his neck out to ensure that the PDP in Rivers State still wins. And that's where the fractions is going to come in. And some would say perhaps this is where Bola Tinubu as president-elect would have to step in, because it was affirming on the fact that the presidency should return to the South that premised Governor Nyesom Wike's support for him in the first place, as opposed to Atiku Abubakar of the PDP. But one would have ordinarily summarized that this would lead to bickerings within the APC, especially in Rivers State, where you have someone like Amechi, who had been in the party long before Wike. Wike is not even a member of the APC. So it looks like his role as the leader of the APC in Rivers State has been undermined because of this alliance between Tinubu and Wike.
But if we did not hear the president-elect Bola Tinubu make any statements after the obvious roles that Nyesom Wike played in the presidential election, we do not expect that he's going to have a say in this gubernatorial election, because one way or the other, it will be you fighting against the work that Nyesom Wike did for the APC in Rivers State. And we know that in our country, we do not have a system where there are, outlined punitive measures for these kinds of, errors. So people just do what they want to do and get away with it. So now we see Nyesom Wike playing the APC during the presidential election and sticking out his neck, as it were, for the gubernatorial elections in Rivers State, because we had reports of intimidation also in Rivers State, more like if you're not voting for the People's Democratic Party, you can't get into certain polling units to vote. So it negates what democracy stands for. At this time, we seem to be having a lot of fostering of governance on the people. It's no longer government for the people. It's, just a number of people that we do not know, faceless people running the country, so to speak. And it's really, really, really worrisome. We have not seen a system in our country where someone errs along the lines of the Electoral Act or the guidelines or an election and they are punished. We have continued to see our politicians flout those orders since, the cycle started, from campaigns to everything. They have flouted it. There is none of them that has been called to order. So we do not expect difference at this time.
Yeah, but we equally said we're going to critique the role INEC has played in this election. It's important to start looking at those now, beginning from the role of the ad hoc staff, because they constituted some sort of nuisance in the presidential and National Assembly polls. First, owing to the inability of some of the ad hoc staff to understand the operation of the beavers. That was the most critical item or component of this year's election, as opposed to the use of the card readers in 2019. A lot of them did not know how to operate the beavers. In some cases, we heard of misplaced, beavers being recovered and later deployed for the elections. Those are concerns now we had from the February 25 polls and whether they repeated themselves again yesterday. There were also issues of beavers A actually sent to beavers B and vice versa. So thus disenfranchising a good number of persons. Ad hoc staff, election materials arriving late at polling units. In some cases, it took hours before voting commenced. In other areas, voting did not take place. And some of the concerns that have arisen from this, within the week, we spoke to a lot of tech experts and those who had been opportune to be at INEC's trainings for the ad hoc staff who were to be used for the exercise. And there were claims that most of those who were trained were not the ones deployed for the elections eventually. And it could explain why, there seemed to be some lack of, understanding of how to operate the beavers by this staff. But yesterday, interestingly, we didn't seem to have issues with beavers now. Everyone called in to say, fine, the beavers are working, they're not malfunctioning, they're all fine. But we now had problems in areas we did not envisage. For instance, footages emerging from Lagos where an ad hoc staff, a core member, was telling the voters, we are not transmitting electronically. If you don't want it, you go home. But if you want to vote, just know we're not transmitting electronically in the full glare of security operatives.
A lot of those things have happened, and those are some of the irregularities we've continued to talk about. The fact that we have one thing on paper, we have the reverse on the field. I saw that particular video, and you're wondering who exactly is calling the shots with some of the things we saw on the field. Because she sounded more like the instruction we have been given is that we cannot upload the results, here on the field until we get to the rack centers. And on the electoral guidelines given by INEC, that is not how the process is meant to run. Now, big question. We are looking at the role of INEC in all of this. If INEC, they themselves continue to subvert the guidelines that they, wrote out for the elections, how then can they say that the elections were free and fair? And how then can they uphold results that are coming out of these centers? Because for the sake of transparency and integrity on the part of INEC, it was said that, results after votes will be collated and sent immediately electronically, uploaded on the servers. And then from there to the rack centers, all of those activities will continue. But we saw that even from February 25th elections, that didn't happen in most of the locations. And then we see that results get missing along the way. Do not forget that there were centers yesterday. Even people called in yesterday and complained that just after they had voted and counting were to start, they had issues spring up in their collation centers, rather their polling units, and then maybe thugs came and then destroyed their votes, so to speak. So these are some of the issues that we had. If we had a system where the machines were working as should, you would know that all of these were already backed up if we're working with a transparent system. But there's been a lot of connivance, and someone would say, let's not attempt to throw the baby and the bathwater. Maybe there are some people in INEC that are doing the right thing, but there are others who seem to have a lot of power, calling the shot and disrupting the electoral process.
Skirmishes recorded in different polling units across Nigeria, or rather across Akwa State. One of such is from back, where we'll hope in the course of today's broadcast we'll get real-time reactions of elections disrupted. With thugs coming in to, cart away some of the election materials, destroying ballot boxes. And I wonder, from the course of Collation today, whether we're going to have results announced from that unit. That's a unit we'll pay special attention to, because as we said, it's the unit of the Deputy Governor of Akwa State, Ibom MFR, where we have had footages clips rather to buttress this point, and we'll do well to bring them up later. But we're still trying to authenticate, the truth behind who masterminded, that attack. Yes, it was the deputy governor's unit. Did it come from the opposition party? I got in touch with someone who was at, the polling unit. From what he told me, and he insisted on the condition of anonymity, that the APC was actually leading as at when the vote count was taking place in that unit. And then thugs just came in and truncated the process, smashed the materials that were there. And then I was told the INEC officials who were there were also attacked. Now, we was trying to reach out to INEC on this. They're yet to comment. By the way, referring to INEC here in Akwa State, but it's disturbing when you have such reports coming in. And he did say he tried to get video footages of the incident, but for fear of attack on this person, he had to wait until the thugs had left, and then he took some snapshots of the damaged ballot boxes and all of that, which we're going to bring up later. But it's worrying. The deputy governor's unit, reports of this nature should not come in. But how can we now tell for a fact who masterminded this attack? Because it's easy to summarize that for the deputy governor to be losing in his unit to an opposition party, then there's a likelihood that his support base could have been responsible, for that attack. But we cannot draw conclusions, of course.
We absolutely cannot draw conclusions at a time like this, because something else that we will notice is that there are people laying hold of conversations happening in this particular election cycle to instigate issues in other camps. So you're going to see party ABC attempt to take a footage of an incident in a particular polling unit or in a particular state and try to pin it on the next political party. So at this time, conclusions cannot be drawn. If we have a system that will actually go further into investigating some of these issues arising from polling units, then we will now be able to say, what party erred against what electoral process in what state. Hasty conclusions must not be made at this time, because then again, that is what some of our politicians want, jumping into hasty conclusions to hit up the polity against parties. But there are some places that those, feeds were very, very obvious. Now, let's take a little look at okay, in terms of that, it's still dragging us to security. How was security on the field where you're having, even at the polling units, where you have a deputy governor, and then you have thugs be able to override the center and cause mayhem? What structures did we have in, our security system and force? Now, we are talking about having what we call it, a policy statement, an architecture for security during elections. This is something that we realized we did not have. The unified security agencies brought together to oversee security in this election did not give us as a country their blueprints, a policy statement, the architecture of how they intended to make sure that security went round in the country. Now, we are not even talking about a situation where they probably would have discussed how they intended. Just give us an overview, of how you intend to do this. INEC provided, some of those information covering how they intended to go about something. But in terms of security infrastructure, we do not have that as a country. It further just shows us how we are not ready to handle a lot of things in this country. And that's why you see a lot of people called in yesterday reporting, my polling units, this and this happened, but we just had security agents just sitting and watching. I mean, Victor Anilaji called us in from Lagos yesterday and said he was even advised by a police officer in his polling unit to say, guy, you just need to go home. There's no need for you to stay here. If they're not going to allow you to vote, just go. So we are seeing a problem. There's connivance, with the security forces, INEC, to disenfranchise people. There's a lot of sorry stories at this time. But if we want to push this a little further, how are we going to clean our system? Because really, the Nigeria that we are looking at, it's more like the elections are done and dusted.
Yeah,
because
we had reports of places where elections
redress.
already started taking place as of Friday night.
Exactly.
Long before we even went into election day proper. So it shows that the level of connivance here is very high, and it's something we cannot sweep under the carpet. And some persons will say these are just suspicious statements made. We don't have facts or claims to buttress this argument. But here's what I always say. The only way to find out or verify if there are truths to these claims is at the collation center, when the results of a particular unit where skirmishes were reported would be announced. For instance, you cited Victor Nilajo's case.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if the resident electoral commissioner from Lagos State decides to announce results that were brought in from a polling unit where it was obvious that voters were not allowed to cast their votes.
Exactly.
Election materials were damaged, people were threatened and
Same thing
intimidated
for
to go home.
Rivers State, yes.
It's
their
worrying.
materials were totally destroyed, and Dr. Becky, who called from Rivers yesterday, had said he's keeping his fingers crossed to actually see if the REC in Rivers State will announce results from Abiakpo, because, you know, at the end of the day, they
That's the local government of Governor
same one that had a lot of issues from February 25th elections, right? They still had issues this time. They had finished voting, and by the time they were to like collate and upload the results, Turks came in and did the worst. So they are expecting that results are not going to come out of there. But like Dr. Becky said, fingers crossed, next thing you're going to hear the REC in River State announce numbers that came out of Abiakpo.
Yeah, just like we saw in the collation of the presidential election, where Senator Dino Melaye, you know, was like, the results from Ekiti were widely contested. I mean, you cannot announce the results where the figures did not even tally. The number of accredited voters and the number of the results that came out, the numbers did not even match. And even with the evidences there, as captured on the result sheet that was displayed at the National Collation Center, Mr. Mahmoud Yakubu still went on to announce the results. So it gives credence to the argument of those who say Mr. Mahmoud Yakubu should perhaps step down and rescue himself from this election, because it appears that the level of connivance here is very, very high. And for how long are we going to close our eyes to this incident? So INEC has more than a massive role to play as far as the authenticity of the credibility of this election is concerned. Already as of yesterday, we saw some of the international observers already issuing statements to, you know, say that this election hasn't gone as planned. And it would be worrying, as we said, if they go ahead in any way to announce, you know, most of the results that we've seen coming out from troubled centers. If there are results, for crying out loud, we're talking of, you know, results that people have doctored. Ballot boxes were already thumbprinted in massive numbers. Vote buying and vote trading still taking place massively. I mean, you can see the footages on the screen there. You know, folks just attacking voters, and then we're going to get results from these places regardless.
Definitely, definitely we're going to get results from there. It's just worrisome how our system, our political conversation in the country has deteriorated to this point. There continues to be conversations of, oh, this is the worst election so far. But there are other quarters that continue to say, this is not the worst election so far in the history of Nigeria. It's more like we have seen a growth in the polity and the political conversations in Nigeria, hence the kinds of results that we are seeing. Now, we can't choose what side of the divide people are going to fall into, whether you say that this is the worst election that we've experienced in Nigeria, or if you think this is the best. But at this time, we have seen Nigerians cry out like never before over the irregularities in the election. As of 8:30 this morning, it was expected that elections would have begun at Victoria Garden City, where yesterday there was an attempt, calculated attempt by INEC again, as they had alleged to disenfranchise them by getting them out of the appropriate voting center to have them vote outside that particular facility. And it was argued that had it been, it was a matter of not having knowledgeable people on ground. If they had dared to go vote outside, then it would have been easier to void the votes of the entire VGC, which we hear has over 6,000 voters, or if not more. So a lot of systemic skirmishes, things that are just done as perpetrated by the system, because if we do not have the hand of the system, we will not have some of these issues. And then that rolls us quickly to the time when elections began in certain centers. As an upgrade from February 25th, more like, INEC did better by beginning elections in certain centers. As of 8 o'clock, 8:30, it was told that a lot of centers had been opened up, INEC had arrived, materials had arrived, and because I know somewhere around 9 a.m. when we were, starting off Nigeria Decides here in the studio, some people had already voted. And so that was quite good improvement as against what we had on February 25th. But did this go round all the polling units for the 28 states that we had elections yesterday? That's a big question. Voting start time and, how the process went.
Well, if you're just joining us, by the way, it's Nigeria Decides 2023. It's the day after the gubernatorial and state assembly elections across the country. We'll welcome your reactions if you've got any. So prep yourself up. Later on, we'll open up our phone lines. Feel free to join the conversation and let us know how elections went down to your respective polling unit yesterday. Were there skirmishes to report on? Would love evidences to that effect as well, just to guide us in the course of our conversation. And for those listening via our sister platform, Planet Radio 101.1 FM, we'll equally give out the phone lines for you to also join in. And please ensure that your reactions are as accurate, civil, and moderate. We'll be talking to a whole lot of persons who will join us later on in the course of coverage today. The very revered Barrister Clifford will be joining us as well. Harry Udo will also be here as well. We'll link up with Ntenek Bang, who is in the FCT Abuja, to also get his thoughts, while we'll also have our attention fixated on INEC's Collation Center here in the state, where our correspondents Francis Edith and Esther Otoyo are in standby, where collation and formal announcement is expected to resume formally any moment from now. So as soon as we can get live pictures from Udodoma Avenue, we'd likely bring them up to you. Let's get back to the issues we were looking at. Let's go now to the performance ratio of the candidates and the political parties. Now we know elections are over and results are trickling in, except that a lot of these results will be, highly contended by candidates who feel it doesn't represent a true picture of the votes that were on ground. And from the projections that are coming in, we'll start with a state, of course. It looks like the ruling party, the People's Democratic Party, having some sort of advantage, over the other parties in the state. Of course, while waiting for full collation, from the results trickling in from some centers, confirmed results alone, that is, the PDP seem to be having an edge over the other parties, but we cannot say it's a huru just yet until we have a full, collation of the result. But from what we heard yesterday as well, we're already talking about issues of voter intimidation. It happened galore here in Akwa Ibom State. I mean, we've talked about Lagos Rivers. So let's come back home now. There were places where we heard voters were also asked to turn back if they do not vote for a particular political party. Where I actually live, that's somewhere off of Kaitinan Road. Just when I got down yesterday from the bus, I was just told, sir, you've missed out a lot too. There was reported shooting, actually. Yeah, that's Idayab, for those who know Idayab Street. To be security operatives, the police in particular, and some thugs. But when I spoke to a lot of persons who witnessed the incident, from what they told me, it looked like they were not so sure about the true status of the assumed police officers, because they said one of the vehicles they used did not carry any plate number and did not have the markings or an identification mark, did not also bear the markings of approved ammunition that the Nigerian police force should use. I reached out to SP Odiko McDonald, the police PPRO, yesterday, and what he just told me was that investigations would be carried out, that he was well aware that there was some shooting, because the position of where the incident took place is not so far off from the state headquarters of the police force in Akwa Ibom. That's in Ikodokpanabia. but we're told gunshots were exchanged. We're even told some persons, had bullets bouncing off, their bodies with no effect whatsoever. You could call it voodoo or anything.
We heard the stories yesterday of people that had cooked themselves to go, for the elections.
Well, interestingly, before I let you continue, that unit is part of a community known as Atan, and that's a stronghold of the People's Democratic Party because it's where you have the chairman of Uyo City Development, Prince Enobonwa, who, as we know it, is a very senior ranking member of the Udom Emmanuel administration. Well, we haven't heard from him as far as response to that incident is concerned, but it happens that it did take place yesterday, and that's very worrying.
We're still looking at the party's performance ratio, and as of 8 p.m. yesterday, we had some percentile, evaluation of how the different gubernatorial candidates were doing in Akwa Ibom State. And, just on a random scale, we had Labour Party at 0.8% as of 8 p.m. yesterday. We had the All Progressives Congress, whose gubernatorial candidate there is Akanemo Dofia with 20.7%. As of 8 p.m. yesterday, the People's Democratic Party, as led by the gubernatorial candidate Pastor Moino, stood at 53.5%, and the Young Progressives Party, Obongbasi Albert, was at 21.3%, and the NNPP, that's New Nigeria People's Party, with its gubernatorial candidate Akpan James Udoidege, stood at 3.7%. Now, this is of the seven gubernatorial candidates that we had vying for the position. This is just an evaluation of the first 5, and this is how they were doing as of 8 p.m. yesterday. Of course, we expect that more results had, trickled in. I know something that was on my mind all of this morning. I was like, I hope when men slept, a lot was not going on. Most of Nigerians are of the opinion that while they slept after the February 25th elections, the announcements were given. But we know that the results are beginning to come in. Collation centers are sitting, and results are coming in. But it already looks good for certain political parties in the state. But let's not be hasty, because you know that sometimes a result from a particular unit can just come and suddenly upturn things. But are those things really realistic in the polity of a country?
Well, it's hard to say. It's hard to tell because for the first time in a long while, I saw the conviction on the part of Nigerians that this election would, to an extent, change things. Well, I believe it has changed things, except that for now, we cannot tell the course or the direction this election is actually taking us. Yes, we have a president-elect, but the matter is in court now as we speak, because not everyone is satisfied with the outcome of that election. People were so convinced to go out and participate in the CVR, to get their PVCs, as well as several other factors. So it's worrying indeed that when they went out there, the reflection on ground is not what many persons expected, and it would be very disappointing if INEC doesn't do right by Nigerians this time. One of the guests who joined us yesterday said, as far as he was concerned, February 25 changed the course of this country, regardless of how the results went. With a lot of persons already suggesting that we might have an interim government and all of that if the results of this election and the announcements of the president-elect or respective governors-elect doesn't go the way most Nigerians had wanted it. So it's really, really worrying. INEC, of course, has to rescue itself from all of the speculations, but it's hard to do so when the evidences on ground, are enough to challenge the authenticity of the results that have been announced by INEC until they do right by Nigerians. So a lot of contentious issues. And another big question most persons are asking is, yes, the presidency has said take your grievances to court.
Yeah.
Okay, don't head to the street. If you have issues with elections, let it be sorted out in court. Yeah. But the Nigerian judiciary itself, it's another matter altogether.
Yeah,
so whether or not they've not been compromised.
Yeah, we definitely will do a quick run to the Nigerian judiciary because there are big questions. There's so much to be unraveled today. But at this point, we need to take a very quick break. And when we return, more of these conversations about the just concluded gubernatorial elections will be going on. Of course, at some point, our phone lines will be open for you to be able to make contributions. To stay with us.
day, we bring you up-to-date information on topical issues affecting the common Nigerian.
From issues on politics,
Hello, Nigeria. I remain committed.
security,
education, health,
lifestyle, and so much more. Join Janice Kobum and Uyai Aniakin
every weekday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Rise and Shine Daily, exclusive on Spectrum Television.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.